And we're live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, as always. And today I am super excited to have Kimberly Belle with me today. She has a brand new book that just came out yesterday. It's called The Expat Affair and a murder mystery with a strong female protagonist in Amsterdam's diamond industry. What a fun subtitle there.
I don't know why they put that there.
Well,
Nobody asked me about that.
in today's competitive book selling market, I guess the keyword packing is everything. So
Yeah,
but
you see it more and more often. I don't know if I love it, but if
yeah,
it helps, hey,
but whether we love it or not, there it is. And so it's
exactly.
that's part of what we have to deal with these days. Hello, B, welcome in. Thanks for joining us today. Kimberly, The Expat Affair came out yesterday. I absolutely love this book. It was such a page turner, and I have a I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure. That sounds horrible when you say it like that, but I love a good thriller where you um, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you want to root for someone
Yeah.
and you're not sure, through 75% of the book, if I should be rooting for this character, if I like them, am I supposed to like them? But I want them to be okay. But it's such a wild ride. So first off, thank you for joining us today. And
Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be
yeah,
here.
and I have a fun question that I like to start with. And one of those fun questions is, what is the first thing that you wrote that made you feel like a writer?
I think, it's funny. I started a blog when I was abroad.
Okay.
And this was before I was even writing books. I was just, I worked in nonprofit fundraising for years and years, but
Okay.
I was living abroad and the blogs were really big. And I was like, I'm going to write a blog about just kind of the silly things that I see and notice and experience in Amsterdam. Oh, we were living south of Amsterdam at the time. And so I started writing that, and literally nobody read it except my parents and maybe a couple of friends back home who were like, I wonder what Kimberly's up to today. But that's kind of when I caught the bug and thought, I would like to do this more
Yeah.
and write longer things. And when somebody would actually read it and tell me, write me to tell me that they enjoyed it, I was that feeling of like, oh, somebody actually liked what I wrote.
Right. Right.
Um, it just kind of lit me up. So that was the very early beginning, I guess.
Now that's very interesting because back in the heyday of blogging, say 2005 to 2010, um, I kind of got bitten by that same bug that, you write something, you're telling about your personal experience, and it resonates with someone. And then even if it's one person, just the idea of having an audience kind of changes your whole idea about presenting something to someone. Can I find a great hook in this story I want to tell? And even though it seems like disparate endeavors, telling the truth about something and blogging versus making up a story, there's a lot of overlap there. That Venn diagram has a big overlap, doesn't it?
Yeah, agreed. It's, even, just a simple blog of like a page or two, you're still telling a story, right? You just
Right.
have to cram it into a much smaller format. But you're still trying to, there's a beginning, there's a build, and then there's an end to a good blog post as well. So
Yeah. Now you were living in Amsterdam, but your accent gives away that you are not from the lowlands.
no, not at all. I grew up in the South in Tennessee, actually. My parents still live there. And I moved to Holland like right out of college
Yeah.
with a boy who is now an older man. He's my husband. We're still together. Um, And then we ended up moving back when the kids were little. Both my kids were born there. And then
Okay.
we moved back to Atlanta um, for a bit. And now the kids are big and grown. And so we bounce back and forth between the two, my husband and I. He has an office there and an office in Atlanta. And you know how it is to be a writer. You can do it anywhere. It doesn't matter where
Right.
you are.
That's right. I'm also from the South. I'm from a little south of where you grew up, from South Mississippi, and we have a great tradition of oral storytelling and storytelling in general. Some of the greatest writers on the planet have come from the South.
Mhm.
Um, what's the storytelling tradition, in Holland? And is there, every region kind of has their own thing, but is there the same kind of? I'm not familiar with the culture there as much, so
Yeah.
is there a storytelling tradition there that seems to go from generation to generation?
I don't know about oral storytelling. I would have to
Yeah.
actually look into that. I speak Dutch, so I do
Okay.
read a lot of Dutch books, especially in, my genre, thriller, suspense books. It is a very different way of telling a story. Sometimes they
That's what I
kind
was
of,
going to ask.
yeah, they
Yeah.
skew a little more literary. You do
Okay.
have some of the, because I write books that are kind of faster reads and
Right.
more plot and thriller focused. And the typical Dutch thriller is a little more, I don't want to say highbrow because it's not that I'm writing lowbrow, but you
W-
know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just a little more literary, a little more obscure, the
Yeah.
story, maybe not so you know, structured in where the plot points, the big turning points come, and the endings are also, you don't have to wrap it up at all. You can just like end whenever you want to end, and that's that.
So definitely a challenge to your American sensibilities.
Yeah, yeah. At first, when the first time I read one, I was like, "This is it, really?" And it took me a minute, but now they've grown on me, and I like that I have to slow myself down a little bit to read them and consume them in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, but I still love the American, a really good, fast moving thriller.
So speaking of being a lover of plot, when you are starting a new book, do you have a plot device in mind, or do you have a character that you begin with and then figure out what to do to that character? Like, what comes first, the character that you're intrigued by, or the situation that you're looking to find a character to plug into?
Normally, it's the plot and the situation, kind of the premise and the plot is where
Okay.
my brain picks up on a story. But this one is a little different because, I've this is my 10th solo book, The Expat
Hmm.
Affair, and I have been hankering to set a story in Amsterdam for many, many books now.
Yeah.
And most of my books are set in or around Atlanta. And so my publisher was very keen to keep me there. So it took me
Yeah.
it took me a number of books to actually get to a place where they were like, "Fine, you can take it overseas." So the book before this was set in Paris, and now this one in Amsterdam. Um, but going back to your question, this book is a little different because I really was looking for a premise that I could set in Amsterdam. So it was um, not character, but really the setting as character, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
that I was working around, and then I came up with a premise that would work there.
Well, I was I've read the Expat Affair. I've read the past couple of books, and the change of venue, if you will, is noticeable. But were there things that you had to think about? Of course, you're kind of familiar with the territory of Atlanta because of coming from the South, but also because you've written there for several
Yeah.
books, so you kind of understand what elements need to be talked about. When you're when you're kind of painting a setting, if someone in Massachusetts who's never been to Atlanta, but is a lover of your Atlanta books, you don't have to describe every city block of Atlanta, but there are certain things that you grab and you include in the story, and that helps the reader to kind of fill in all the places
Mhm.
that you, because nobody wants to listen to you describe every little thing
Right.
about Atlanta. Well, but the same thing, goes for Amsterdam. I've never been to Amsterdam. So what elements do you decide to include to help a Southern boy like me feel like he's there and experiencing the story?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I said earlier, I moved there straight out of college, pretty
Okay.
much. So it was, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago it was, but it was a while ago,
It was at least two.
at
Yeah,
least.
at least.
So I had to really think really hard what it was like, because now Amsterdam is so familiar to me, and
Hmm.
it's kind of home. And so you're right. I do need to describe it a little differently than I'm describing a place like Atlanta, because I'm writing primarily for American readers. So,
Right.
I really had to think about what was it like when I first moved there, when everything felt new and strange and different and confusing and all the things. So you do have to be a little um, choosy about which parts you elevate when it comes to setting. I mean, like Amsterdam, you can't talk about the city, or you can't set
Hmm.
anything there and not talk about the canals.
Right.
It's kind of cliche, but it's also like Paris. You can't go to Paris and not see the Eiffel Tower. It's just there.
Right.
So, you do have to be a little selective with which pieces you describe. But I wanted to do the city justice, but also explain it from a way that someone new who had just kind of gotten off the plane and was
Right.
moving through the city, what they would notice.
Yeah. When you're telling the kind of story that you're telling, um, place is definitely an integral part of it, but the the people difference, the cultural difference of the way people interact with each other, that is also something that you need to kind of paint. What were some of those things, and how do you kind of identify the difference in just the way culturally people interact and the things that are kind of Dutch, as opposed to being American?
Yeah, that really stand out. It was all the things that I noticed when I first got there. I'm like, what is happening here? But like, the feeling of being in a place where simple everyday tasks, things that you do all the time and that you do without really even thinking about them. Like, for example, answering the phone. How do you answer a phone in Dutch? I mean, there's just a cultural way that they do it. They don't say hello, they say their name. But if you don't know that, you know,
Right.
things like that. So I really had to think back to, what are the things that stood out to me? All the bikes there, finding your way around the city with signs that are not in English, things like that.
Gotcha. Um, when you start thinking about a new uh, plot, because you said that you like to think in terms of plot, um, do you think of kind of the, like, this is the twist that it's going to be, or do you think in terms of, this is a scenario that I could put a character in, and they would be terrified. Now let me see what they do. Like how do you start introducing your characters to these awful things that you're going to do to them?
So I'm like, when I come up with a new story idea, I really think through my premise, um, and maybe kind of where the story starts and where it would end. And then I spend usually a couple of months filling in the different, plot points, and coming up with an outline. By the time I sit down to actually write the first word, my outline is usually, I mean, it can be anywhere from 10 to 20 pages or more. So I'm pretty pretty, the story's pretty complete by the time I sit down to write. But I'm thinking, as I'm going through the plot, I'm thinking about, okay, who are going to be my characters? Who's going to populate this novel? And, kind of, I don't want to say backdoor them in, but I'm thinking about who would be the worst possible person to put in this position, and how can we make it worse for them? So, I have a handle on my characters when I sit down to actually write. But they really get fleshed out as I'm writing. And sometimes that shakes up the plot in ways that I didn't foresee going in. So things shift, they move around. But so far, all my endings have stayed the same. My major plot points have stayed the same.
Gotcha. In this book, we've got two major characters that we're following, Raina and Willow. Where did they come from? And kind of what was your initial thoughts about them? And did those initial character traits and your initial thoughts about them, did that carry through the entire writing of the book?
Yeah. So both characters kind of came from, my idea going into this story was the expat experience, and that like confusion when you arrive and being in a place that's so far from home where you don't really know that many people. In Raina's case, she knows pretty much nobody. She knows the dead guy in the shower and maybe a couple other people that she's met along the way. But I mean,
she kind of knows the dead guy in the shower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Willow's been there a little bit longer. So she's married to a Dutchman. She's, got a kid with him. But she still doesn't quite feel like herself in this place. And, she's got some secrets that she's trying to protect as well. So that definitely influences her behavior. But both of these characters came from the initial premise when I came up with the story was, what if you are on the other side of the planet and the worst thing happens, something horrible happens, and you're in a place where you don't understand completely how things work. You don't have people you can trust. You don't have someone there to help you or to call. You don't know how anything works. Then what? What happens then? So that was kind of my starting point for the whole story. And now I've forgotten.
Did those character traits follow through the whole writing? Did the characters change? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
In the writing of the story, did you discover more about them?
Yeah. And especially, and I don't want to give anything away, so it's going to sound a little vague maybe, but especially Willow, she surprised me because I knew going in that she had a secret, the secret that kind of comes to light at the end of the story. But I didn't fully understand just how that made her behave. Didn't completely understand that until as I was writing it. So she kind of surprised me. And, she was one of those characters where you don't know, she has a secret, she's hiding something, but you don't quite know what it is or what her motivation for it is. And, so you're not quite sure if she's the character you want to be rooting for or not. And that was something that, that I really worked on as I was writing, and that came out as I was writing.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, that you're conflicted about characters.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're writing a character, having a character that has secrets that they don't want to be exposed to the world is a great motivator, I've found, because people I think generally want to be good people. They want to do the right thing generally. There's the rare exception of people that are just psychopaths, and they just are what they're, but I think the vast majority of people want to be good people.
Right.
But, when you have this thing that kind of haunts you in the back of your head and kind of, niggles and nudges and all of that, that can be a great motivator to get characters to do things that frustrate the reader in a
Yep.
good way,
Yeah.
or that carry the story off course. They can be really fun motivators and awful things to do to characters at the same time.
Yeah. I agree. And I especially love that when, as a reader, and this is what I was going for too with Willow, especially, is, when you find out what the secret is and why it caused her to behave the way that she did, that it feels almost justified. She's
Right.
done these bad things, but for in her mind, and maybe even the reader's mind, for a really good reason.
Yeah, for sure. Let's backtrack just a minute. So you began writing this blog and kind of got bitten by the bug. How does that translate into the desire to write fiction? And when you first decided to write a novel, was that the first novel that you had published, or are there trunk novels or desk drawer novels out there that might see the light of day one day?
There are desk drawer, like, shoved to the under way far in the back under my bed that will
And
never see the light of day. As a matter of fact, I probably still don't even have those files, like the good riddance. And I never finished them. They were, my practice, trying to find my
yeah.
voice, trying to
And
figure
are
out.
you a real writer if you don't have one of those at least?
I think you have to,
I
like,
think you do. Yeah.
mess up a couple of times, take some
Yeah.
wrong turns, especially like when I first started, because my first two books kind of straddled the line between women's fiction and suspense. And
Mhm.
so, I think my first my first attempts at a story were not, um, they weren't thrillers, for sure, not thrillers. They weren't maybe even suspense. They were more general fiction kind of stuff. And I was, trying to figure out my voice, trying to figure out what kind of story I wanted to tell. So it took me a couple of false starts before I figured that out. And then I wrote two books and finished them both. And as I was writing the second book, I had started looking for an agent with the first one, and I
Mhm.
just wasn't really gaining any traction. And then as I started with the second book, I was like, this is the one that's going to get me an agent. It was a little hookier story, and that's ended up being my debut novel, The Last Breath.
So how did you were talking about trying to find your voice and just trying to figure out where you fit in the literary landscape. What was it about thriller and suspense that made you realize, okay, this is who I am, that this is where I thrive? Like, when did you kind of realize, okay, the women's fiction not so much, but when I dream up of these kinds of stories, this is where I thrive?
Yeah, it was really two things. It's, they're the kind of books that I love to read.
Right.
And I read a lot of general fiction as well, less and less these days. But back then I was reading a lot of it. And, I really enjoyed that too. But the books that really did it for me, and still, are the ones that are a little more thrilling, I guess, suspenseful stories. So, yeah, so I definitely just kind of naturally gravitated to that genre, to the genre I'm in now. But it was also after my first two books that, like I said, they straddled the line. My publisher came to me and said, we'd really like you to fit more solidly in one of these genres, and we think suspense is the one for you. And by then I had, been at it long enough to know that when your publisher asks you something, there's only one acceptable answer, and that is, yes, of course I can do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of course.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
And then that book, my third book was The Marriage Lie, which even now is probably my best-selling book. It sold the most copies by far of any of my books. And so it seems they were right.
Yeah. And was that the book that followed kind of the request from the publisher?
Yeah. Yeah. That was
Wow.
it. Yeah.
So looking back, can you see any choices that were made for that book that helped you to hit all the notes that you were, because like you said, that's your most well-received book to date. Um, what was it about that book that resonated with readers so much?
I think it's the and maybe that is because my first two were maybe a little more women's fiction-y,
Yeah.
dealt a little more with the relationships, and The Marriage Lie is about, it has the thrilling plot. It's a husband who um, gets on a plane to the West Coast. The plane goes down, and then his wife finds out that he was one of the victims in the crash, but he was supposed to be on a plane to Florida. And so she starts trying to figure out why he lied, what's on the
Right.
West Coast, what's going. So, you have that, you have the relationship dynamics, which
Hmm.
is maybe my background from the women's fiction. This story about, a husband and wife who really truly loved each other, but the husband had, this big secret, and in his head at least, a really good reason for keeping it from her. So I think because you had like this thrilling plot, but also the relationship dynamics, which is, I guess, domestic fiction, but it was a book that was just really easy for me to write because it was the plot like carried the story, but there was this real heart of emotion to the story that I really like digging into as well. I mean, I don't know. Who knows what makes a book succeed? It's like
Yeah.
pixie dust and fairy wings. And
That book really should be like an 8 or 10 part miniseries on Netflix or something. That's,
I
you
agree.
know,
I think so too. Hey,
yeah,
Netflix, call me.
yeah. Come on, go ring her phone. Um, so this is book 8 or 9 for you now.
10. It's 10.
10. Good.
Well, 10 solo, and then I have some co-written ones as well.
Okay. Co-written when in the process? When you were brand new, somewhere along the way?
No, they came out. Well, we started. It's a series, and we've
Okay.
we've written three. Two are out. The third one comes. We sold them to Audible, so they first come out
Okay.
on Audible exclusive, and then they come out a year later in paperback and ebook.
Right.
But we started writing them in COVID, in the deep dark days of COVID. So they're more current. They're
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact number, which number they came between,
Yeah.
but yeah.
How did you find the co-writing experience versus the solo writing experience? Was it invigorating? Was it frustrating?
Loved, love,
Yeah.
love, love, still love it. And I will, a couple things about it. First of all, like writing, as you know, is so solitary. Like you
Yeah.
sit in a room by yourself with these imaginary people and you just make stuff up. And you don't talk because you have to be quiet and type. And,
Right.
so it's really, but if you run into a problem with the story, there's really nobody really there to help you figure it out either. So it's a very solitary experience. And then I wrote these books with a couple of co-authors, and you do have to be very organized with it. So we're all plotters. We all like spreadsheets and color coded, and really talking
Yeah.
through our story. And then we're super organized as we're writing it, because we're writing, each of us, a chapter a week. So we have to know exactly where my chapter begins. I carry it to here, then the next writer picks it up, carries it, but we're writing simultaneously those chapters. So
So you definitely have to have a plan.
you have to have and be super organized and have constant communication. We have a rolling text that just goes 24/7. But if you run into something, you don't have to solve a plot knot by yourself. You can be like, oh, hey, I was just writing our chapter and I realized blah, 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 blah. And then, you're off to the races, and 2 seconds later it's fixed, or we figured it out. Whereas by yourself, it could take you days, right?
Right. Right.
And the other thing that I love about co-writing is, and again, I can do this because I'm working with outlines, and pretty detailed outlines, but I
Yeah.
like writing those books together. So my solo book plus my co-written one, and then I'm writing. I kind of bounce it back and forth. So when I get tired of writing one, I can go write the chapter in the other, and then bounce back and forth until we get there.
That fascinates me because I've met writers who are like, I cannot hold more than one story in my mind at a time. It's gonna, confuse things. And I know other people that are like you. I can just bounce back,
Yeah.
from one to the other. Um, it sounds to me like you're saying it helps to keep things fresh, to know that if you're not feeling the story today, go get into the other one, and then
Yeah.
while you're over working on the other thing, your subconscious mind is ruminating and working out problems over here. Is that what you find to be the case?
100%. And that's exactly it. As soon as it's like, if you're stuck in your story, in a scene, and you get up and you go for a walk, take the dog for a
Hmm.
walk or whatever,
Right.
that's when things like all of a sudden become clear, right? It's the
Right.
same when you switch back, for me at least, when I switch back and forth between stories, because like like you said, your subconscious is still going. You're
Hmm.
maybe not thinking about it consciously, but your brain is still figuring out what's going on with the other story. And I find that, like, I catch momentum on both stories when I'm writing them, because like you said, it stays fresh. It
Yeah.
doesn't get boring. You don't get sick of one characters or whatever.
Yeah.
I love
Uh,
it.
as someone that lives in two different places, the States and Amsterdam, um, are you more creative in one place than the other? Do you find that when you go to the other home that it takes you a while to get the gears turning, or
I
you
actually
know
prefer writing in Amsterdam,
okay.
but it has nothing to do with actual setting or my setup or whatever.
Yeah.
It's all about that. It's 6 hours ahead of the U.S., of the East Coast,
Okay.
so my email doesn't start pinging me until like 3 o'clock. It's the best. Social
I'll
media,
bet.
everybody's asleep. Email,
That's
everybody's
fantastic.
asleep, and I can
Yeah.
just like, and even, I mean, I guess I could turn it off, but nobody does that.
Right, right. You can turn it off, but do you? Yeah, yeah, I get it.
Exactly.
I get it. Um, so if we know anything about the publishing industry, the expat affair has probably been off your desk for quite a while now, as you go through all the edits and the publishing schedules and all of that. So when you turn a book in, do you immediately have another project that you're thinking about? Do you give yourself a couple of months to just be empty minded, as if that's a thing that ever
I
happens to a
know,
writer?
right?
But do you like what is your production schedule already primed up for the next one, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, I'm already like 65,000 words, I guess, into my next one. It's not due till
Yeah.
the end of the year, so it's a nice, roomy deadline for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm already busy, and was pretty much immediately already busy on the next one, and the co-written one, which comes out in August. I wish I could take a month or two off and just
Yeah.
kind of let things percolate. But I don't know, my publishers, and I think that's the curse of the genre too, is they really
Mhm.
love a book a year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which doesn't give you a month or two off. I mean, it takes me, 6 to 8 months really to write a book. So
Yeah.
I need to get busy,
What
especially when you're trying to balance co-written, editing, writing,
Sure.
pitching, outlining.
How long is your pre-writing? How long of is that process? You're outlining, you're kind of discovering characters and figuring out twists and turns, and before you actually start drafting the book, how long do you spend with it in the pre-writing phase?
It just depends on the story. It's usually anywhere from a month to maybe 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, actually, well, that's once my publisher says, I like this premise. Now give me an outline. So then I start working on the outline. So a premise, I mean, I've got a file of,
Sure.
just like little nuggets of
Hmm.
whatever things that I've read, or
Yeah.
But once I get an okay, I spend usually a month to 2 or 3 on the outline, and I'll bounce it around with my editor, and my agent's also really good at that, at like story and seeing where there are maybe holes or where things don't make sense, or yeah.
Gotcha. When you're writing in the genre that you do, the twist, the ability to keep the reader engaged but guessing is crucial. And when a reader finishes your book, when they close that back cover, they should be able to say, "Wow, I totally should have guessed that, but it I could not guess it. Like all the clues were there, and I should have seen it, but I just couldn't." And when Gillian Flynn published Gone Girl, that shook up the suspense thriller genre, and then we had a spate of unreliable narrators for a
Yep.
couple of years. But once that ground is broken, it's tough to get readers to just keep going along with it because they see it coming. Especially, you have to be so careful because if you telegraph it at any point, the
Yep.
the the suspense is broken, and the book, the magic is gone. So with a character like Willow, especially in this book, where we know Willow has a secret and she's being kind of cagey. She's holding some things back. We know there's something. It's not that she's an unreliable narrator. It's that we don't understand what she's holding in her back pocket.
Right.
So how do you balance those things and keep the readers guessing and in suspense, knowing that they're not perfect characters? Like we know all along, I should not trust this character with everything I have, but that's all I have to go on. Like how do you find that balance and walk that line, so that you're not just going for the gimmick, but it's a really powerful emotional twist.
Yeah, it's different with every book. It's also really hard. It's and I probably spend a lot of time fine tuning things like that, especially with Willow. So she has a son. Her son has a uh, what do you call them? Cochlear implants. So
Mhm.
he's got a hearing disability. Um, going in the story that she loves her son more than anything, and that she would
Right.
do anything for him. So, you give her, I gave her this reason for, you know, really every move that she makes. But then I also gave her behavior that maybe doesn't quite fit in what you think that she should be like.
Right.
Um, she's I'm trying to say it without giving anything away. She makes some moves that are unexpected, I think, in the story, and slowly reveals a side of herself that maybe we didn't see coming. Um, but I think you have to be really careful in how you dose it. It is difficult. First, you have to hook the reader, get them invested in her and her life, and then you can start maybe showing a side of her that's a little less pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is about building trust with the reader, isn't it?
Mhm.
And slowly letting us see those flaws.
Yeah,
And but if you I mean, we're talking about a book that begins with a murder. So
yeah.
that's, but there is a thing as kind of slowly bringing out these characters flaw. And again, I'm trying to dance around the
I
actual
know,
plot of the book
right?
because
It's
I don't want
hard.
to spoil it for people. Um, but anyway, yeah, it's a masterful job.
Oh, thank
Um, the new book, uh, The Expat Affair is available everywhere now. It just launched yesterday. Go to your local bookstore, grab a copy. If you don't have a great local bookstore, we'll put links to it in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon and from Audible. I've not gotten a chance yet to listen to the audiobook. Have you heard any of it
No,
yet, Kimberly?
I haven't either. I haven't had a chance yet to listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about your books being translated to audio? Does it freak you out at all to hear someone else reading your story?
I love it. And the narrators are so talented. They're all, I mean,
Absolutely.
most of them are, trained actors. And so
Yeah.
they can bring a story to life in ways that you just don't get on the page. So I love a good audiobook. And especially when I find a narrator that I really like, I'll like click through and see what else they've done. And I've discovered some really great books that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll put the link in the show notes where you can grab the audiobook as well as the paper edition or the Kindle edition, whichever you prefer. Kimberly, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the amazing stuff that you've been up to and continue to do, your fantastic back catalog and everything, where is a good place for people to find you online and to dig into all that you're doing?
I am on Facebook, Instagram, all the socials really, but all the links for that are on KimberlyBelleBooks.com. And I also run an author interview series
Okay.
called the Killer Author Club. So check that out
Love it.
as well. It's we talk about killer cocktails and killer books and have killer authors on. It's a lot of fun.
Wonderful, wonderful. We'll link all that up to make it easy for folks to find you. Kimberly, it's been so much fun chatting. Thank you for taking time to come on the
Yeah,
show.
well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.